Have you seen the headlines? India's economy just crossed the $4 trillion mark. The stock market is soaring, global investors are pouring in money, and there's this incredible sense of optimism. It feels like India is finally taking its spot on the world stage, becoming the next great economic powerhouse. And look, there's a lot to be proud of. This isn't just a number. It represents real progress, real ambition, and the hard work of over 1 billion people. But what if I told you this shiny new number might be hiding a more complicated story? What if this incredible boom is actually a trap? Today, we're going deep into the Indian economy to ask the tough questions. Is this growth sustainable? Who is it really benefiting? And could this $4 trillion milestone be a double-edged sword? Let's find out. First, let's give credit where it's due. Reaching a $4 trillion GDP is a monumental achievement. To put it in perspective, that's larger than the entire economy of the United Kingdom or France. India is now the world's 5th largest economy and is on track to become the 3rd largest by the end of this decade. This growth is fueled by a few key things. India has one of the youngest populations in the world, what economists call a demographic dividend. This means a massive workforce and a huge domestic market. We've also seen a digital revolution. From UPI payments changing how we handle money to the sheer number of people coming online, technology is transforming every sector. Plus, global companies are looking for alternatives to China, and India, with its Make in India initiative, is positioning itself as the world's next factory. This has led to a surge in foreign investment and a booming stock market, which just crossed $5 trillion in market capitalization. On paper, everything looks fantastic. The story is one of unstoppable ascent. But here's where we need to look closer, beyond the headline numbers. A country's GDP is the total value of all goods and services produced. It's a great measure of economic activity, but it doesn't tell you how that wealth is distributed. And that's the first piece of the puzzle: inequality. A significant portion of this new wealth is concentrated in the hands of a very small percentage of the population. While the stock market is booming, benefiting investors and the upper class, what about the average person? When we look at GDP per capita, which is the GDP divided by the population, India's story changes dramatically. India's GDP per capita is still around $2,800. For comparison, China's is over $12,000, and the United States is over $80,000. This means that while the national pie is getting bigger, the slice for the average Indian is still incredibly small. This creates a tale of two Indias. One of gleaming skyscrapers, tech unicorns, and luxury cars, and another where hundreds of millions still struggle with basic necessities. This leads us to the second major concern: the nature of employment. India's economic boom is often described as jobless growth. What does that mean? It means the sectors that are growing the fastest, like IT, finance, and specialized manufacturing, are not creating enough jobs for the millions of young people entering the workforce every year. These are high-skill, high-productivity sectors. They generate a lot of value, a lot of GDP, but they don't need a lot of people. Think about a software company versus a textile factory. The software company might be worth billions, but it only employs a few thousand people. A textile factory might be worth much less, but it could employ tens of thousands. The bulk of India's workforce is still stuck in low-productivity sectors, primarily agriculture, where incomes are low and work is often informal and precarious. Over 40% of the workforce is in agriculture, but it contributes less than 20% to the GDP. This is a massive imbalance. So while we celebrate a $4 trillion economy, we have a crisis of underemployment, where people have work, but it's not enough to lift them out of poverty. Now, let's talk about what I call the consumption trap. A big driver of GDP is consumer spending. And in India, this spending is becoming increasingly reliant on debt. More and more Indians are taking out loans for everything from smartphones and televisions to cars and homes. On one hand, this is a sign of a modernizing economy. Access to credit can empower people. But on the other hand, if incomes aren't rising fast enough to support this borrowing, it creates a very fragile situation. We're seeing a surge in unsecured personal loans, which can be risky. If there's an economic downturn or if people lose their jobs, they could default on these loans. This wouldn't just be a personal tragedy for those families. It could trigger a wider crisis in the banking system, which could bring the entire economic engine to a halt. So is the growth we're seeing being fueled by genuine prosperity or by a mountain of debt that could collapse at any moment? So is India's $4 trillion GDP a trap? I don't think it's a deliberate trap, but it is a potential one. The celebration of this single number can create a dangerous sense of complacency. It can mask the deep structural problems that, if left unaddressed, could derail India's growth story. The real challenge for India isn't just to make the economy bigger, but to make it better and more inclusive. This means focusing on creating jobs, not just any jobs, but quality jobs with decent wages. It means investing heavily in education and skill development to prepare the workforce for the industries of the future. We can't have a situation where a software engineer in Bangalore earns a global salary while a farmer in a rural village can barely survive. It also means boosting the manufacturing sector, especially in medium and small-scale industries that are the real engines of job creation. This is the path that countries like South Korea and Taiwan took. They focused on export-led manufacturing to create mass employment and lift millions out of poverty. Furthermore, India needs to bridge the massive infrastructure gap. While we see new airports and expressways, many parts of the country still lack reliable power, clean water, and decent roads. These are not just quality-of-life issues. They are economic necessities. A factory can't operate without consistent electricity. A farmer can't get their produce to market without a good road. These investments create jobs in the short term and boost productivity in the long term. Finally, the government needs to manage its finances carefully. While spending on welfare and infrastructure is crucial, it must be balanced with fiscal discipline to avoid high inflation and debt, which can hurt the poorest the most. To conclude, India's $4 trillion economy is a moment of pride, but it should also be a moment of reflection. It's a milestone, not a destination. The real measure of success won't be the size of the GDP, but the quality of life for the average Indian citizen. Will they have access to good jobs, quality education, and reliable healthcare? Will their children have a better future than they did? These are the questions that truly matter. The path from a $4 trillion to a $10 trillion economy is not guaranteed. It requires tackling the tough challenges of inequality, job creation, and sustainable development head-on. India has the potential, the people, and the ambition. The key is to ensure that the economic boom lifts all boats, not just the yachts. Thank you so much for watching. This is a complex topic, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the Indian economy? Don't forget to like this video if you found it insightful and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the biggest economic stories shaping our world. See you in the next one.